Today we're going to talk about some different tips and tricks when it comes to virtual interviewing. As you know, COVID continues, as well as employers realizing that there's so much value to hiring people virtually and having a virtual workforce, we're going to continue to see video interviews for positions. You know, you might not even meet the people that you're working with before you get a job. And so I thought this video would be a really great way for people who are, virtually interviewing for the first time, or for people who are brand new to the workforce and are also interviewing for the first time to, have a few things in mind prior to hopping on a call with a hiring manager or a recruiter. So let's get started about talking about the first tip that we have for virtual interviewing. The first thing that you want to do, no matter what, when you get an invite for a virtual interview, is open up that invite and see what platform that the company is operating off of. And you're going to want to make sure you have that platform downloaded on your computer. Don't assume anything. Make sure that you have Zoom, WebEx, and or any other, different platform that the company is operating off of. This is vital. Go on your computer and the applications, check to make sure it's there, click the link, make sure that it downloads immediately. Definitely don't open it because they might have a different interview going on at that same time, but just click it to make sure that you have it. Unfortunately, this has happened to me. I recently was interviewing in the past couple of months. I went to click on the link during the time, literally right at 3 o'clock when my interview was set, and I realized that I did not have WebEx on my personal computer. I was mortified. Luckily, the person that I was interviewing with was super sweet and kind, didn't mind at all, understood that, we have some hiccups when it comes to virtual interviewing, especially when we're so new to it. And it didn't matter when I ended up getting a job offer. So that was a very lucky circumstance, but not everyone's going to be that way. So again, the first thing I would recommend, no matter what, is making sure that you have the platform for the interview downloaded on your computer ahead of time. The second thing that we're going to want to talk about, and we have a tip for, right, is making sure that your environment is appropriate for interviewing. So what does that mean? That could mean so many different things. But the first one that I want to talk about within that category is making sure that you have a white background behind you. When you're interviewing and you're having a discussion with a hiring manager or a recruiter, you want to make sure that they're paying attention to everything that you're saying. They want to make sure that they're paying attention to all of the value that you're going to bring to their team. You don't want them looking at the different books on your bookshelf or the art that you have going on behind you. You don't want any distractions whatsoever. If you don't have an apartment or a space, a house that allows for a white background, what I would recommend is to either blur your background or some different platforms, like Zoom I know is one, will have different options that you can pick. Also Microsoft Teams will have nifty little office spaces that you could project behind yourself. Definitely pick one of those, which again goes back to that first point of downloading the platform ahead of time. You can make sure that you have one of those picked out so that when you click the join button, it automatically pops up behind you and the interviewer isn't seeing your background before you're ready for them to see it. Something else that we're going to want to consider when we're talking environment is making sure that people can hear you well when you're interviewing. So if you're unable to sit in a quiet space, some of us live in cities, some of us have children, it's not always possible. I would recommend getting some headphones, whether they're ones you plug into your computer that have a little microphone that you can talk into, whether you have wireless ones, over the ear, in the ear. I would definitely just make sure that you had some type of headphones that you could use. If you're worried about the sound quality of those headphones, I would recommend hopping on your computer or even just like on a phone call with a friend using those headphones and asking whether or not that they could hear you. That will definitely be important. Other things that we want to talk about, right, is making sure that you're centered within the frame. I've conducted interviews already where you can see people from all different angles, which again, we want to minimize those distractions. So you can either get something like a laptop stand that you can put your laptop on that makes sure you're eye level with the camera, or like if you don't have something like that laying around, you don't want to order it on Amazon, I use books. They're incredible. Really anything, a shoebox, anything that you can stack your computer on to bring it from, you know, being level with the countertop to being level with your eyes. You want to be able to look your computer in the eye, your interviewer in the eye, so that they know you were there, you were present, you were paying attention. So the third tip that we're going to talk about is dress code. I cannot stress enough that, you know, just because we're in our homes and we're in a relaxed environment does not mean that we should dress relaxed for our interview. We should be dressing and taking this just as seriously as if we were in the office interviewing. So, you know, what does that mean exactly? Dress professional, business professional. It's kind of a mystery always to everybody, but you can't go wrong with a nice button up and a blazer. I think that always looks very well put together. You know, it really is your judgment call. So whatever feels good for you, feels very professional, definitely put that on. Also, make sure that you feel very well groomed, whether that's your hair pulled back because you want it out of your face so that, you know, they're paying attention to you and your content and not other things that are happening around you. That's great. If you have a beard, you know, maybe you groom that prior to your interview. It just really depends on what makes you feel your best. Do that. You just want to feel good. If you feel good, you're going to perform even better because you're not going to be paying attention to all of the extracurricular things that are happening. You can just pay attention and focus on the interview. The other tip that I have within this though is if you're really stressed out about it, if you don't know what you should wear, ask the recruiter. They are there to help you. They're your advocate. They want you to get this job. They want you to be successful. They want to move you through the interview process. They want to close it out. They want to be like, here, take this job. We want you to have it. So if you're ever stressed out about something, especially dress code, don't hesitate to send them an email and say, hey, I just wanted to check in. Is this appropriate for the dress code? You know, what is your workplace dress code? And then you can dress appropriately. One thing to note about this though, which, you know, isn't as frequent as the dress business professional type of genre of things, is if you're interviewing for a tech company, I would just say, if you know somebody at the company, you can ask them what might be appropriate. Again, you can ask the recruiter what would be appropriate for an interview. I do have some friends that work at tech companies and have relayed to me that, you know, if somebody dresses too fancy for their very like casually known company culture, it shows that they're out of touch with the company culture, which doesn't always reflect the best on them. So there is a caveat there. I've never worked in tech, so I can't tell you what to do per se, but it's just something I think to note and to look into. So the fourth thing that we're going to talk about, number 4, is your desktop setup. The really incredible thing about having a virtual interview is that you can have different resources available to you as you're taking your call, and the interviewer won't know the difference. I would recommend making sure that they are still up on your screen. You can see them. We want to make sure that you are making a connection with that person, that you're making a connection with the video, you're making eye contact, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the video. So, right, make sure they're up on the right-hand side of your screen or wherever it is that you want them. And then on the left-hand side screen of your computer, you can bring your resume up. You know, some people do like to reference their resume when they are doing a job interview. This can be really helpful just so that you're not forgetting everything. It can be really helpful when, you know, somebody says, tell me about yourself, and you can give them kind of a rundown of your entire resume really quickly. Another thing that you could have up is your LinkedIn. You could have up their LinkedIn. What else? You could have up a list of things that you want to make sure that you touch on, that you match to the job description, and you were like, these are things that are very important to this position. I want to make sure that I touch base on them. You could have those up. You could also have a list of questions up, so that when you come to the end of the interview, you can let that person know, like, yeah, I have a couple of questions. They're just listed here, and you can make sure you touch base on all of those so you're not forgetting everything. Because again, just make sure that you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. I feel like that's such a key point when interviewing. I think sometimes we get stuck in feeling like, I just want them to want me so badly. I want them to give me this job, that we forget that this is an interview of them as well, and we have to want the job just as bad as they want us. Let's see, what other tips do we have? Oh, one thing that I did want to mention, I know sometimes people like to take notes during interviews. I'm, you know, occasionally someone who likes to take notes. If you are virtually interviewing, I would not recommend taking notes on your computer. I think, you know, from a receiving end, it can come off as you being really distracted. You could hear the click clack of the keys on the keyboard, which again is very distracting for the interviewer. You want, again, to make sure that you're making that connection with them. If you do want to take notes, if you feel really strongly about it, I would do it the old-fashioned way. I'd grab a notebook and a pen and have that out in front of you. I would also be sure to mention to your interviewer that that is something that you're doing, so that if you're occasionally looking away from the camera, you're looking down, you're writing, they're seeing the top of your head instead of your bright face, they know what you're doing. I would do it, you know, sparingly, as to, you know, make sure that, again, you're making that connection with your interviewer. But again, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking notes. But again, do it the old-fashioned way. Don't do it on your computer. Okay, so the fifth tip that we have is just to prepare, right? We want to do a little bit of prep work before the interview, but like, what does that mean? That can mean so many different things. The first thing that I always like to do, and I can do a more extensive video on this later, is to look at the job description, look at my resume, and kind of compare them against each other in a way that shows me, you know, what specifically I should be talking about and focusing on during the interview, right? We know that you're qualified, you got an interview, they're interested, they want to learn more, but we want to make sure that when we're giving examples of things that have happened that they're asking for, we want to make sure that we're touching on specific things that they're looking for their job. So an example could be, right, that maybe you're in a job that has a broader array of duties, and you're interviewing for something that's a little bit more niche. So you're going to want to look at your resume, the job description, and then what you're going to do is you're going to highlight the different bullet points on your resume that specifically match up to the job description. So, you know, if you're in marketing, you probably do such a large array of different tasks within marketing. But if you are going from like a marketing coordinator role to maybe a social media specialist role, within that marketing role, you're going to want to highlight the areas in which you are specifically doing social media. And then when you're pulling from examples of things when they're asking you questions, you're going to want to always touch on that social media experience that you have. Okay, great, we have that one down. What's next? Another thing that you can do is practice in the interview with a friend, a close family member. If you have a friend that's a recruiter, even better, ask them to just quiz you on a few questions ahead of time in a way in which they might interview you. It's gonna be super helpful. Be open to receiving feedback from those individuals as well. They are the best people in your life to give you feedback before you go into this interview and before, you know, you start giving different answers. I think sometimes it's just like it's just practice. The more you do something, the more comfortable you feel doing it. The more times you answer the question, tell me about yourself, the more comfortable you're gonna feel going through it, and you're gonna have a more consistent answer over time that you're just like, yes, I know this question, I can answer it immediately. Something that, you know, when you're doing that with your friends and your family, or a friend that's a recruiter, you know, ask them about the length of time you're spending answering each question. I think it's important to make sure that, you know, you're giving the recruiter that you're working with all of the details, all of the answers, everything that they want to know. But we want to make sure that we're leaving time for them to ask additional follow-up questions. If you are answering a question, you feel like you're being concise, but you're not sure if you touched on every point, you can always ask your recruiter then, like, would you like me to explain more about X, Y, Z? And a lot of times they'll tell you, and then you can fill in the blanks for them from there if that's something that, you know, you're concerned about. The other thing that I would recommend you do to prepare is look up the person you're interviewing with on LinkedIn. I do this every time, and I take screenshots of their profile, and then I just take a quick look at it before I am going into the interview. I think this is a really great way to connect with your interviewer. If you're, you know, from the Midwest, sometimes it's really fantastic. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, right? So this is like my best example. I can always bond about the college that I went to with another person if I find that we went to the same, you know, undergrad university, or, you know, the same master's program. I think it just, you know, it just allows you to like better connect with that person, and allows them to better like remember, you know, who you are. And yeah, I think it just like helps through the interview process. It makes both people a little bit more relaxed. get some of those nerves out of the way by just having a little bit of small talk ahead of time. If there, again, are different things you can touch on in their LinkedIn profile that like you noticed about them that you can make that connection point. So the sixth tip that we have is to monitor your body language. You know, even though you can't meet with this person in person, you want them to feel like they know you as a person. And we need to find ways to communicate our confidence through a screen, which can be really hard. So some things that I would suggest in doing this is, you know, sitting up straight, making sure your shoulders are back. I would make sure that you are making eye contact exactly with the screen wherever it is that your camera is, so it looks like you're making eye contact with that person specifically. I like to talk with my hands. It shows that, you know, I'm engaged. You might not be a hand talker. You don't have to do that. Totally fine. Just one that works for me. Helps me stay focused on what I'm doing. You probably noticed me like flailing my hands all around this entire video. You know, something else that you're going to want to do is just make sure that you're being attentive. Again, some of that's going to come with the eye contact. If they're telling you a little bit about the position, I would just make sure, you know, that you're asking questions that, you know, are appropriate for the position and or what they're telling you. Just like be curious. Don't be afraid to ask those questions that you have. Yeah, and just be enthusiastic. Show them who you are as a person. I think sometimes we get nervous and some of these things go out the window and we're like a little slouched over. We're not making eye contact and we're looking to the side and we're just feeling really nervous. But again, you know, going back to our prepare bullet from before, our other tip, if you're practicing this ahead of time, you know, with friends and family, they can give you this feedback and it's something that you can, you know, work on and work through. And, you know, then you can communicate that confidence that you have. And the more confident you appear on camera, the more they're going to know and believe that you're confident in your skills and that you are very well suited to the job. We finally made it to number 7. And this one, I know is not a part of the virtual interview process per se, but an after the fact, but I do think it's incredibly important to send a thank you note. I think sending a fantastic thank you note just reinforces a few things that we talked about in the last point. I think sending a great thank you note can communicate confidence. It can show your authenticity. It can show your excitement for the position. And all of these things are just going to further reinforce that you're the right person for the job, you know? So what does that mean? How do you do that? What does that look like? So immediately after your interview, what I would suggest is writing down a few notable points about, you know, maybe an obstacle or a challenge that, you know, the hiring manager mentioned, or just something very specific that stood out to you. You're going to want to focus on that in the thank you note. You're going to want to tell them, you know, maybe that you're confident you could solve it. Maybe you want to tell them that you have a solution for it. Maybe you want to provide that solution. You know, if you went to the same college as them, maybe it's something that, you know, you bring up in that thank you note as well, so that they, you know, remember you and they know who you are and that you had that connection. So really what a thank you note is just like further emphasizing the connection, further showing them how confident you are, further showing them how excited you are about the position and about this opportunity, and that you would be a fantastic candidate for the job. If you made it this far, thank you for watching all of my different 7 tips and tricks for virtual interviewing. I hope at least 1 or 2 of them were helpful to you in your interview process, in your, you know, career change, job switch, new job journey. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below in the comments box and I will get back to you. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. Bye.